Oh, we ready? Okay. Hi, everybody. Whether you were forced, coerced, or volunteered to come here, thanks for being here. We are Community Living. My name is Michael Plains. I'm the CEO of Community Living. So Community Living is an organization that has been providing supports and services to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities for almost 40 years. Does everybody know what intellectual and developmental disabilities are? A lot of people don't. A lot of people think it's mental illness, but it's not. Intellectual and developmental disabilities. Again, the more the merrier. Intellectual and developmental disabilities are things like autism, Down syndrome, cerebral palsy. There's a number of other conditions that qualify as developmental disabilities. Typically things that people used to call mental retardation, but we don't use that word anymore. Hopefully none of you do either. But the developmental disability, the main thing that determines something to be a developmental disability is that it occurs before the age of 22. So, it's during the developmental years of a person. So, you could be born perfectly fine. You could be in a car accident when you're 17 years old, sustain a traumatic brain injury, and you could then qualify as a person with a developmental disability. If you had the same car accident when you're 23, you don't qualify. It's just the way the rules and regulations go. So, you can go to the next one. So again, as I was saying, mental retardation, what people used to say, now it's intellectual developmental disabilities, IDD. So over the years though, supports and services for people with developmental disabilities have changed significantly from institutional settings, like big state hospitals and things like that, which is what this is supposed to be. How will it play?
Just hit the left bottom button.
It won't play on your laptop, so I redirect. But I want to show you some pictures of what that actually looks like. Keep going forward with it. What am I doing? Mary Beth, we're going to need you. I was trying to do it upside down. But anyhow, services used to be provided in big institutions, nasty old places. And that's what we're trying to attribute. Oh, shoot. Go back.
Okay, I'll just leave it right here.
Okay. This place is called the Rosewood Center. It used to be down by Baltimore. It at one point housed thousands of people with disabilities. It was big old. There we go. Okay. So services have moved to community-based settings, such as this kinds of services that Community Living provides. We have 26 houses around Frederick, where we support people, and Sandy will talk a little bit more about that as we go on. And we have day employment services. We're trying to find jobs for people. So you can see those. They're big old nasty buildings. That's what's supposed to be in the slideshow. So, next slide, please. Keep going. So, in 1999, there was a Supreme Court decision called the Olmstead Act, which said that people with disabilities have to be provided services in the most integrated setting possible. So that meant that states could no longer keep people in institutions if they had a desire to receive services in community-based settings. And that was really the end of institutions, as most people know, because states then had to begin closing and getting people out into community-based settings if that was what they wanted. Oh, yes.
So if they, under this act, it's only if they want that, or is it something that like they still would put people in institutions?
Excellent question. No, it's only if people want it.
Okay.
You still have the option to receive services in an institution. Although some states don't have any anymore, Maryland still has 2. There's one in Hagerstown called the Potomac Center, and which probably has about 30 people maybe. There's one on the Eastern Shore called the Hawley Center, which also has very few people in it. But, you know, I worked for another organization at one point when we were trying to close down this place called the Rosewood Center and move people out into community-based settings. And there were families who just raised a fit about the fact that their son or daughter might be moving out of this institution into a community-based setting because they thought this was safe, it was predictable, you know what can happen out there in the world. So, but yeah, I mean, it's a very good question. If you choose, you know, you can have the institutional center. So it went from this to something that looks more like this. And that bottom picture there is, you know, one of the community living houses. It looks like anybody else's house, and that is what we strive to ensure people have available for them. So we started with residential services, providing housing about 40 years ago, as I said. We now have 26 houses that serve about 76 people. Overall, we serve about 150 people right now with about 300 staff. So I mean, we're a sizable organization here in town. All our staff are trained in the needs of the people we support. Everybody has to do first aid and CPR, and they have to take a medication administration class that is developed by the Maryland Board of Nursing because we have to pass meds to people on a daily basis. They take whatever other trainings are necessary for the people that they are supporting and that they are working with. So somebody has seizures, you take a training on seizures and how to deal with those. If somebody has diabetes and needs insulin, you take training on how to monitor a person's blood sugar and give insulin. In addition to the direct support staff that we have available to us, or the people that actually work with people we support, we have a nurse and 2 LPNs because we are responsible for everybody's total care. So we're running, almost 2,000 appointments a year, medical appointments for people, and the nurses monitor all that. And then, as most nonprofits are, we are governed by a volunteer board of directors, people from the community that have an interest in the organization. They provide a governance function for the organization. They're essentially responsible for me as the executive director. So, this is Sandy Owen. She's the director of residential services. She runs the programs that operate all the homes, and she's going to tell you a little more.
Welcome, and thank you all for being here. I've worked with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities for probably 25 years, and it's such a pleasure and a challenge. As Michael indicated, we have 26 homes, and that's a challenge to ensure that everyone is living the life that they want, and that they're receiving the medical care that they want, and that their families are able to visit them, and that they go out and have some activities and live their lives just like we do. But a lot of times I get that phone call that says, how do I get my son or daughter into your services? And not everyone knows that this is all state-run. So your first step is when you realize your son or daughter has an intellectual or developmental disability, you would make application to the state of Maryland. So you fill out this whole application, but you also have to submit to them some kind of documentation, medical documentation or psychological documentation or an IEP from school, something that indicates that your child or your sibling or yourself has an intellectual disability. And then they send someone out, someone called a coordinator of community services. They're assigned and they come out to your home and they interview you and make a recommendation to the state. So they'll recommend that you are eligible for services or you are not eligible for services. And considering you're eligible for services, they would also sit down with you and your family and anyone else that's important to you and create what is called a person-centered plan. So they would help you to ensure that you're looking at all aspects of your life. That would mean your residential life, your work life, your financial life, your spiritual life. So all aspects of your life they'll sit down and talk with you about and make sure that your needs are being met. So if your residential needs aren't being met, let's say you're 21, you're graduating from school, and you'd like to be out in the community, as long as the state of Maryland deems you eligible and there's funding available, you could come to us, and if we have an opening, you could come and move into one of the community living houses. And from there, your CCS, your community coordinator of services, works with you yearly to ensure that, even though you have residential services, to ensure that we're doing what we said we were going to do and that you're still having all of your needs met. And when you're living with us, most people, they're adults, also have a need to work. And that's where Tom Buechner comes in, and he'll tell you a little bit more about their work lives. Yes, ma'am?
I have a question. You mentioned you're 21 and able to, and you want to move out on your own. So this picks up after, like, say, because I know with the American with Disability Act that enables you up until you're 21. So this kicks in after you graduate high school or something like that?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah.
In our world, 21 is considered an adult
Yeah.
in the Developmental Disabilities Administration world. So,
Yeah, so most people, they call those young people the transitioning youth. So they're transitioning out of the world of education, where they're able to receive their education from 18 to 21, and then from there they transition into the adult world, and that's where we come in. Good question, thank you.
another question.
Yes?
Yeah, how many people are able to live in like each house? It's like there's certain sizes of the houses, or
Individuals can choose. Most individuals live in a 3-person home, and that's primarily driven by finances. You know, it usually takes 3 people to support a home financially. But we also support people who live in their own homes, providing personal support care, which is another area of our agency. So the majority are 3-people homes, and then we have generally one staff supporting those 3 people. But on occasion, if their needs are excessive, we might have 2 staff members supporting those 3 people. On occasion, we'll have a 4-person home, but generally no more than that. Anybody else?
All right, I'll take it. Just by show of hands, how many of you are from Frederick County originally and grew up in Frederick County? Go around the room really quickly. Are most of you from Maryland or other states as well?
Maryland.
Maryland, everybody? And is anybody older than 21 here? So you're all between the ages of 19 and 21, is my guess. 18?
No.
17, 16, 20, 27. So the reason I'm asking, most of you probably, so when I started working in this field, I was in college and I started working with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities as a summer job. I was either 19 or 20 at the time. I think it was 20. And it was back in the day when institutions were still open, and even conditions out in the community were not the best. I think people that were transitioning out of institutions had a lot of behaviors that they learned while living in institutions in these really poor conditions to adapt and get their needs met, protect themselves. These were big institutions where they had to live with a lot of people they didn't always have the resources, they didn't necessarily have enough food, they didn't have personal belongings. So a lot of people developed behaviors that were really not consistent with living in the community. And so agencies that help these individuals transition from institutions had to deal with these. And there were literally, there were something called takedown teams at the time where people would be physically restrained. And it was a really bad situation. Fortunately, in the last 20, 30 years, there have been huge changes. And it's all about respecting the individual, respecting individual choices. So as people transition from schools into society, what are all of you thinking about right now? I assume you're all students here. Why are you here? What are you thinking about? Why are you going to school? You have to raise your hand and just call.
Oh, okay. Well, I'd like to go into law school after this, and so I think looking at it specifically civil rights and human rights, as some schools will put it, I think that while we see like rights for the LGBTQ community or African Americans, or this is kind of one of those that they don't highlight, and so I'd just like to know more about everything across the field rather than just like one specific area.
Yeah, that's awesome. And a lot of the changes that are actually happening right now are because it is really a civil rights issue, right? We want to give people personal choice in their lives, and that means as you all are transitioning, I'm guessing most of you live with your families, some of you still may live with your families, but you're starting to assert yourself and your independence, right? When you're 15 or 16, you can only make so many decisions, and your parents still have a lot of say in what goes on in your life. And as you transition into your 20s, you start having the ability to make decisions for yourselves, right? And unfortunately, many of the people that we support with disabilities, there's still a lot of external controls on them. Even if they're in their 30s and 40s, and they have parents who are in their 50s and 60s, their parents are still trying to exert a lot of influence over them. And the coordinator of community support that Sandy talked about is really that primary advocate to allow somebody to do what they want to, right? And some people might want to, somebody might say, I want to be a pilot. And the parents might say, you have a disability, there's no way you can be a pilot. And just even want them kind of in a secluded situation where they're safe. And while it might not be realistic for them to be a pilot, they could potentially do a job that's related to the airline industry in some way, where they can be around airplanes, or be around pilots, or something like that. So, my position with CLI is director of the day program, and we serve about 70 people. We have 55 people who are looking for work or working but interested in work, and then we have another 15 who are in a retirement program, who are kind of beyond working and no longer interested. But we do try to support people from ages 21 to 93 within our day services. Of the people directly in our day program, 14 are employed, who we support, employed in the community. And then we also have a personal supports division that employs another 18. So we have 32 people that we support that are out in the Frederick area working. And they're people that might visibly have a disability, so when you're out in the community, you might see somebody that has a visible disability that's working, earning money, earning at minimum wage, if not more. And typically people work between 6 hours and 20 hours a week. So it's normally not full-time employment. But our department's responsibility is to try to match up their interests and desire to work with an actual job, which is, as I imagine you can, in your minds, it's not always easy, right? Finding a job for somebody with limited abilities. And so we do something called customized employment. We try to look at that skill set of abilities and interests that somebody has and match them up. You're at an awesome age right now. We're supporting people that are transitioning directly, at age 21 into our services. They've had the good fortune of being in regular high schools, regular classes, back when I was in the field, everybody was segregated. If you had a disability, you went to a separate school, and there weren't the same expectations that are put on people or opportunities that are given to people with disabilities today. So it's fantastic if we can find young people who can relate to the people who we support as potential part-time employees. So if any of you have an interest in gaining more experience, we have 3 different departments right now, but ultimately we want all of our staff supporting the 150 people that are supported by CLI kind of working together. And we support people 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and for a part-time job, it's a great way for maybe some of you to get involved. And there's the caregiving aspect. In our residential program, there's still a lot of caregiving, but even in our retirement program, we have that as well. But the big push is to get out in the community and get people who we support out among their peers and developing these networks of natural supports. Instead of only having people that are either family or paid staff who they consider all of those people their friends, or other people with disability their friend group, we really want to push and get people more involved in their communities to have a larger network of supports for them. So, I mean, just thinking back, I was your age when I started working in this field. It can be extremely fulfilling, it can be extremely challenging as well. But when you see somebody able to make strides in their lives and help people kind of, start to actualize a portion of their dreams at least, it's amazing. So, sorry, go ahead.
I have a question. Okay, you were talking about employment. Do you have like any certain restrictions on that? Because I know like I tried to apply for art, but you had to be 21 and had to have your driver's license for at least 3 years. And like I know a lot of places you have to have a full driver's license in order to work. Like the way station, I also applied there, but I'm not able to get my full license until April.
Okay. And that is, so the age is not a restriction. However, the driver's license, the majority of our positions do require you to drive. And our insurance carrier is typically have a restriction of they want you to have had a driver's license for 3 years. But potentially there is some wiggle room with that because if somebody is an awesome staff, and our push is also to encourage people that we support to use public transportation. And if you have a license, you might not be able to drive a company vehicle or transport individuals, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't support people that we support. So I think there's the opportunity to have that conversation.
And in the residential side, there are positions like a week overnight positions where a house may, somebody who lives in the house may, they get up to use the restroom at night and they have a risk of falling, so we want somebody awake in the house. Most of the time the staff are sleeping in the house overnight, but there are those awake overnight, we call them.
I applied for a week overnight at the base station, but they also had like the weekends. They want people who work AONs to work on weekends as well, which were 12-hour shifts. But those shifts included transporting some of the clients around. And that's one reason why I couldn't work there, because like of that one shift.
Well, we'll give you an application, you can call us.
Yeah, and there are different, and so our personal supports department is really working with individuals that either live independently in the community or live with their families, so are not involved in our residential program. And they may need supports at really odd hours throughout the week, evenings and weekends, and a lot of it is just being able to get out in the community and create those natural supports. So, depending on your background, your interests, there could be a fit for that. And again, it can be incredibly fulfilling. There's a lot more flexibility, I think, in that department too, with hours. And you can always be like a part-time on-call staff person, which is cool. And a lot of the young people who we support, they don't want to work with us old farts, right? I mean, they want to hang out with young, us older individuals. Now, sorry for the second part. But seriously, right? I mean, when I was 19, I didn't want to hang out with somebody that my parents' age. And unfortunately, I think in this field we often have support staff. They're great support staff, but they're older. And if we have young people who have energy and can relate to somebody else who's just transitioning at age 21, kind of out of the public school system, and coming in, they're looking for work. They want very similar things to what you guys want, right? They want to get a job. They want to be independent. They don't want to have mom and dad tell them what to do. And it's still figuring out what it is they want. And at your age, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I started working in this field as a summer job. And, it's a great opportunity for the people who we support to experiment and try different things and try different volunteer opportunities. So many of the people that come to the TAPE program, they'll go out and volunteer at different sites. And it's called a discovery process, where as a program, we try to learn more about them, but as individuals, they're also learning about themselves, right? They're learning if they can work on their feet for 5 hours, or if they prefer to sit down, or if they're okay working in a really noisy environment, or if they prefer to work where it's really quiet and might even need headphones to kind of block out some of the noise. And it's an ongoing conversation between the individual, their family, their community, coordinator of community supports, our staff, and it's everybody. They can actually choose who they include on their individual team. And the more people that are involved, the better. And the more input they give, the better. And ideally, when the people who are currently in their early 20s, when they're in their late 20s, hopefully they'll have figured out some things and have employment and be able to live independently. And we support some people that are, in the past, people made the comments like they'll never hold a job or they'll never live independently. And they have, in some cases, full-time jobs, live independently, or getting married, getting driver's licenses. I mean, it's pretty exciting stuff. And at your age, you're all at that time where you're kind of exploring and the world's opening up for you, right? You're not. When you're in high school, the world is still pretty narrow. Your opportunities are kind of not as big. And even when you're in school, it gets a little bit more. When you exit school, all of a sudden there are a ton of opportunities, and we want to provide the same amount of opportunities for the people that we support that anybody else would have in life. So that's kind of the general.
If you see Mary Beth,
Okay.
here you go, email me.
So once you do come in, this is Matt Cora. Matt is the one who would be providing all applicable trainings, getting you set up and let him do a little sleep.
All right, my name is Matt Cora. I'm the trainer over at Community Living. Thank you guys for attending. What I want to talk about is topic of people first language. That's the practice of using care in language when we're talking about people with disabilities. For example, we'll say a child with disability versus a disabled child. This puts the person first and emphasizes the person instead of the disability. So when we think with language. So if we can change the language, we can change the thinking. I want to share with you something that I found on the ARC's website that I think is very pertinent to this topic. The language a society uses to refer to persons with disabilities shapes its beliefs and ideas about them. Words are powerful. Old, inaccurate, and inappropriate descriptors perpetuate negative stereotypes and attitudinal barriers. When we describe people by their labels of medical diagnoses, we devalue and disrespect them as individuals. In contrast, using thoughtful terminology can foster positive attitudes about persons with disabilities. One of the major improvements in communicating with and about people with disabilities is called people first language. People first language emphasizes the person, not the disability. By placing the person first, the disability is no longer the primary defining characteristic of an individual, but one of several aspects of the whole person. People first language is an objective way of acknowledging, communicating, and reporting on disabilities. It eliminates the generalizations and stereotypes by focusing on the person rather than the disability. Our words and the meanings we attach to them create attitudes, drive social policies and laws, influence our feelings and decisions, and affect people's daily lives and more. How we use them makes a difference. People first language puts this person before the disability and describes what a person has, not who a person is. Using a diagnosis as a defining characteristic reflects prejudice and also robs a person of the opportunity to define him or herself. There's a lot of ways in which we can change our language. In fact, probably towards the end of our lives, and even now, we may have a disability. Disability affects 1 in 7 people. And if you think of disability in the loosest sense, even someone that uses glasses can be thought of as someone having a disability. So we can say something like, a person can't see well, but we can also say, someone who uses glasses. It's the same message that we're getting across, except we're focusing on the positive. We're focusing on the supports that the person has, instead of the negative, instead of the disability. We could say someone can't hear well, but we could also say a person uses a hearing aid. We could say someone doesn't walk very well. We could also say they use a wheelchair or they use a walker. You may have heard a lot of medical terminology used when talking about diagnoses. Some old terms we may have used, like mongoloid, to describe someone who has Down syndrome. Even in the news today, we still have articles come out that say an autistic child. But is there a way we can change that? Simply by putting the word child in front of autism reflects that it's a person, not so much a disabled person. You may have heard the term epileptic, but let's focus more that it's a person that has epilepsy. we could say someone that's afflicted by multiple sclerosis versus a person who has multiple sclerosis. And we can even use judgmental terms like crazy, nuts, a maniac. But it would be better to say that a person has a behavioral disability or a person has a behavior support plan. This can even apply when we celebrate a person. We can say the person has overcome their disability. We're still focusing on the disability rather than, instead we should say something like a person who is successful or a person who is productive. Simple ways that we can change our language to focus more on the person and their successes more so than their disability and include them more in our day-to-day life.
The handouts are just different examples of people first language versus things that are not people first language. And an article by a lady who is a leader in the field of developmental disabilities who wrote about people first language. Just something for you to take away here. We'd like to read that. Anybody have any other questions? Hi. Okay. We appreciate you guys coming. I know it's not a big group, but you know, this is the second time we've done this now. And the more we can get the message out about what we do and who we support, the better. I mean, you know, it creates little pockets of the ambassadors out there, people who help us spread the word and spread our mission. Again, like we said, you know, we have positions open all the time that are, in my opinion, very, very suited to a college student in a lot of ways, because they have variable, flexible, sometimes strange schedules. You know, the awake overnight things that, you know, if you're a night out and you study all night long, you know, you may only have to, you know, be officially engaged for, you know, an hour or two a night, but, you know, so sometimes those positions work out very well for students too. So, like I said, we can always talk to Mary Beth about that if you're interested, but regardless, we're glad you're here. Glad you got to hear the word. And, have a good rest of your day. Oh yeah.
So like all your locations is located in downtown Frederick or throughout Frederick?
They're all within the city limits, but not necessarily downtown. There's some up in Amber Meadows, some over by McCurdy Field and Jefferson Street area, if you're familiar with that. The Wingate area down by going out towards Golden Mile. So we have a couple clusters. Nothing like we don't have like a group of houses next to each other, but just in certain neighborhoods they tend to work better for us.
And if you want to keep up with what we're doing, you can sign up for our email list, or you can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We're CLI Frederick.
And you were mentioning the civil rights, right, being an attorney ultimately, and so what Matt was talking about, it's like all those terms that are not person-centered, person first, right? Mm-hmm. That you can hear kind of the same thing. There's other civil rights issues and how people are labeled, and instead of labeling people, we want the person to kind of come ahead of everything else. And you know, hopefully you're a budding advocate for everybody, right? We should advocate for people again. Good luck with that, and good luck to all of you kind of figuring out what it is you're doing down the road.
Yep. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, guys.
Came a little bit late.
That's okay.
Yeah.
He was the last one on the agenda. So.
All right. Came just in time.
First class?
Yeah, it was acceptable. I mean, at least in today's terms, not appropriate, but it's certainly acceptable. It's certainly acceptable. But it's still in a negative